Joining us on the line is Lila Rose. She is founder and president of Live Action, one of the most effective pro-life groups in the country. Lila, thanks so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me on, Ben.
So, Lila, obviously a very disappointing midterm election night for Republicans, particularly disappointing for a lot of pro-life people across the United States. There are a bunch of ballot initiatives in places like California, Vermont, Michigan, Montana, Kentucky. There were a bunch of initiatives that essentially went in the anti-life direction, re-enshrinements of a right to abortion in the constitutions of some states, rejection of pro-life laws in other. What do you make of this?
Well, actually, I have a bit of a different take. I don't see it as a tremendously disappointing day. I think we saw a strong showing from very unapologetic pro-life candidates who are great leaders, and we're likely going to take back the House. And I think that that would be a tremendous step forward for our movement to curb the evils of the Biden administration, which is super pro-abortion. And when it comes to the referendums, I don't think that was a huge surprise when you actually look at what happened. The reality is the pro-life side was outspent in this election 35-1. So there was over $400 million, Ben, of pro-abortion advertising coming from the Democratic Party and their allies. And that doesn't even include the pro-abortion nonsense and the lies and the misinformation that comes from media groups and all the other people, influencers and celebrities that back that agenda. But on the pro-life side, $11 million, that's it, was spent by the GOP on pro-life advertising. So looking at that reality, it is actually encouraging that the referendums didn't lose by as much as they lost when they went to a direct vote to the people. Because when a lot of people showed up to vote on election day and filled out those ballots, those initiatives on abortion, they were believing lies that they had been inundated with, 10, 15 times ads that they saw again and again, telling them that, women are going to die or abortion. This isn't even about abortion. It's about women's empowerment. And that was what they thought going into the voting booth, when in reality, these are extreme pro-abortion initiatives that if they were actually educated on, many people would have actually voted for life on.
So let's talk about tactics versus strategy here. So obviously everybody strategically on the pro-life side is looking at this, and we're trying to figure out what is the best way forward for pro-lifers here, particularly state by state, because honestly, this does not look like this is going to be predominantly a federal issue. The Supreme Court seems to have made clear, including Brett Kavanaugh in his concurrence, that he is not going to truck with a lot of massive federal legislation, which is both good for pro-lifers, because if Democrats take Congress, then they would presumably try to push harsh laws that would allow abortion in virtually every state, but not wonderful for pro-lifers at the federal level. What it does mean is that if this is a state-level thing, what should the tactics be? And this is really an open question that I think is a sort of fascinating conversation inside the pro-life movement. Should incrementalism be something that is pursued in purple states in order to actually win, which is essentially what the pro-life movement has done over and over again? They spent 50 years basically incrementally arguing back the borderline of when people think abortion is acceptable. It used to be that people thought in the last trimester it was acceptable. Now it seems like, or the last two trimesters they thought it was acceptable. Now it seems as though it is inching backward to where most Americans believe that in the first trimester it's kind of acceptable, but certainly not in the second trimester and definitely not in the third. When you look at purple states like Florida, for example, Governor DeSantis here did not push a full ban on all abortions from point of birth because he knew that while Florida is looking increasingly red, that would have been counterproductive. It would have ended up with rejection. Instead, they passed a 15-week pro-life bill. That will presumably, with a Republican legislature, get pushed back to 12 and then to 10. And you're starting to see this in some of the other sort of purple to red states, whereas it seems like some of the states where there's eagerness to go for broke, the public reacts too strongly against that. Do you think that there should be, in some of these states at least, an incremental approach? You go for broke where you can, but where you can't, you got to take an incremental approach to convince people gradually, because that's likely to be a more durable victory.
I don't see it that way. I mean, look at Governor Abbott in Texas, and he had one of the strongest pro-life laws in the country, and he won his reelection. So it's not like, I don't think if Governor DeSantis was bold with this, as he's bold on, child mutilation, and he's bold against wokeism, I think he would do well. And I think he can be bold on a heartbeat bill. I think he can be bold on complete legal protection. And I think a lot of it's about how it's messaged, Ben. I really think, the polling, you've studied polls for decades on this, or at least the last decade. And look, when the poll question says, do you support abortion when the baby's heartbeat can be detected? A large majority of Americans, 70% plus, say, no, we don't support that abortion. But then if you ask them on another poll sheet, do you think women should have a right to abortion in the first trimester? they'll say yes. So it's really a voter education issue, which is where strong leadership can make or break the result, really. So I would encourage Governor DeSantis to be aggressive and bold on this. It's going to motivate his base. And I don't know his, political ambitions. I know a lot of people are wondering about that, but I think that's the kind of long-term federal leadership that the country needs. And a quick other note before talking more granularly on state tactics on the pro-life fight. Listen, I think that there is a federal role here for the government does have a federal role to play in protecting life. Absolutely. And I think that getting rid of Roe is a step forward to enable the House of Representatives, the Senate, and ultimately, I hope, a pro-life president one day to do their job in protecting life. And that's because the 14th Amendment already protects life. I think it's very clear that we all have equal protection under the law, that no state has the right to deprive anyone of their life without due process. And that includes children. Of course, children should be included. They are human beings like you and me. And so I think it's very clear that there is a federal obligation for lawmakers to take action when they can. And that's why we're urging abortion restrictions and protections of life, complete protections of life, ultimately at the federal level. And I think it is actually possible, Ben, with the right leader. If we have the right political leader in office, the right president in office, someone who's a true pro-life stalwart, which I think is doable next election, and we take back the Senate, or take back both the House and Senate, which we may have already mostly done, and we can get past that Senate filibuster, we might see something in many ways surprising as Roe v. Wade's overturn just a few months ago, but something tremendously successful for our movement to protect life at the federal level. So that's what we're going for, without apology. In addition, we're working at the state level. So live action is at the state level. And here's our policy. Here's our approach right now, Ben. If it's a red state, we're all in on you need complete legal protection. And we're working with lawmakers. We just had 40 of them at a summit in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, working and crafting, what does this look like? Other groups are partnering with us on this. But this is how we're getting tremendous steps forward, like in places like Alabama or in places like Ohio, we're seeing pro-life laws passed. And so we need to keep working on that. In a purple state, I think we have to push the envelope here. We can't just play a defense game. We can't just say, well, the pro-abortion side doesn't want any restrictions, so we're just going to meet them halfway. That's actually not really how it works. I think how it works is if there's bold leadership and good messaging, you can win the fight. And that's what I would encourage purple state leaders to do. Is say, listen, you're already winning the fight when you're bold and unapologetic and you're good at public relations. I mean, even President Donald Trump, who seems to hate DeSantis lately, complimented his public relations game in the state of Florida in his recent rant against him that he put out. And that's true. If you have good public relations, and keep in mind, Ben, that's why the pro-abortion side won these referendums, is because they outspent pro-life 35-1 in public relations. So if you have good public relations, and if you have that pulpit like DeSantis or other purple governors would have, advocate for life and see how many people are persuaded by saying, listen, we can do better for women, and abortion is violence. We want to protect children and their hearts are beating. Let's protect these children. People are very attracted by those messages. The polling proves. And then in the dark blue states, I'm in California. It's tough. But that's where Live Action's focus is education, to seed the ground for future pro-life victories by persuading people one person at a time. It's very tedious. It doesn't look particularly sexy. It's not as much as the hot and fast, quick response of politics. You get your result immediately, but it's that crucial work to do one heart and mind at a time, to do the education campaigns that we're doing, work in schools and churches, to prepare the state for future pro-life victory.
Well, that is Lila Rose over at Live Action, the best pro-life group in the country. Go check them out and support them at liveaction.org. Lila, really appreciate the time.
Thanks, Ben.